Ghost Boyfriend by Brenda Valdivia. In the fall of my first year of middle school, I would pass by an old graveyard. It didn't feel big enough to be called a cemetery, mind you. Those imply a great field of the dead, and this was a small tucked away place on a residential road next to train tracks that still torment the residents of the East End to this day. Also, it's right across the street from a preschool. At the end of the residential street was my middle school. 5 days a week, I would trek by ride or foot to the school, about half a mile away, and contend with the beginning and end of life smack dab in the middle of my commute, my clear backpack bouncing on my hips as I went. It was an eerie feeling to pass by the spot. I wasn't alarmed by death. By this point, I was already an expert at going to funerals. But I was always caught off guard by the fact that someone looked at a graveyard and thought, this is a good place for a preschool. Toddlers would sometimes run and catch bubbles in the yard or line up for juice. I would spot their tiny hands gripping toys or shrieking those high-pitched banshee sounds only the young of us can make without terror. And right across the street, silence. I don't remember the first time I decided to walk into the graveyard. I vaguely remember it was fall and the air was crisp. I was barely in the 7th grade. The allure of a pink and teal tile cross as someone's headstone drew me in. It was utterly out of place from the worn stones with their soft green moss and perpetual wet look from decades of Houston humidity. The cross belonged to a woman who died only a few years before I checked her grave. She was young for death, about her mid-40s. By that point, most of the dead I knew were the elderly from my mother's church and family. When you come from a large Mexican family, funerals are nearly as common as birthdays. As I walked away with my curiosity satiated, I stumbled across a large headstone. It was taller than me, worn with the earthy gray of concrete eating away at the name and numbers. For a moment, I thought it was an important man, until I realized it was a boy's headstone, only a year older than me, who died 100 years prior in the late 1800s, named Nathan. As I went home, I couldn't put Nathan's death away. Death came early enough for the woman, but what did the boy do to meet it so soon? I wasn't sure how to get the answer, but I knew that the computer labs at my middle school were newly donated, and the internet may be able to help. I must have typed in something like grave, talk to, history, or whatever combination of words I could think of, because I stumbled across a website that would give me all the tools to solve this mystery myself. A ghost hunting society webpage, complete with audio recordings and pixelated GIFs of skulls spinning. They talked about electronic voice phenomenon, or EVPs, and how to use recording equipment to hold up in the air like a talisman. Ask your question, and the dead would answer if you stayed still and silent enough. You would take the recording device home and listen at full volume, sure to catch a whispered answer too low for mortal ears. Take photos in a haunted location and catch floating orbs in the air, proof of the undead. I had a tape recorder to record songs off the radio and was thrilled to realize it had a voice recording option. Armed with my new way of life as Brenda Valdivia, undead reporter, I went again and again to the graveyard to stand over Nathan's grave. Who are you? Why did you die? Do you miss anyone? I would stand in silence, my heart pounding as I faced death at 3:30 in the afternoon. But like a rookie, I felt trapped to the simplest mistake any ace reporter was subject to. I had fallen in love. Talking to Nathan was easy. He was quiet, wise. He knew things I didn't know, having been around for so long. I could see him 5 days a week, and it was easy to say hello and never overstay my welcome. This went by until I realized I was getting older than him, and the classes on the Civil War and Texas history made me realize we would have been on different sides. So star-crossed. Also, he was dead, and the distractions of living boys were getting harder to ignore. I forgot about Nathan. The recordings revealed nothing, just a weird kid talking to herself, the sound of cars driving by, and children laughing, living children. Not interesting. But it was a few weeks after my 13th birthday that I would seek out Nathan again. My cousin Nico died violently in a car accident 2 weeks before my 13th birthday. It was a long, brutal death. It took a week. She was barely 14. The car she was in flipped off the road and landed upside down in a bayou. It devastated us. For days, I would vomit out of nowhere and twist like a strained rope. I never had sisters, so Nico and Fabi were the closest thing I had, and now I stood by her small casket full of trinkets made by her friends. When she was buried, we were in a car accident during the procession, and I had no idea where Nico was entombed. All I knew was that she was in the many huge forest park cemeteries that scatter the city. I begged my mother to take me, but only a few weeks later, I would become hospitalized with my own issues. I needed emergency surgery that left me still able to get pregnant, but unable to have children of my own. No one to name after Nico. My aunt, who was always tough, had become rageful and hard to anyone who wasn't immediate family. We couldn't go near her, so none of us really felt right about visiting Nico. I lost a cousin, she lost a daughter, I would tell myself. But looking back, the truth was that my mother's religious beliefs made it that the dead would not be visited, that there was nothing beneath the earth, that all that was dead was dead. To commune with them would only invite demons, not memories. And yet, I would dream of Nico, still and fading away as I screamed at the edge of a riverbank locked in mud, her form across the brown waters, out of reach. She was like a lost soul taken from me by La Llorona, ripped from the bayou. In a haze, I walked by the graveyard to go home from school. The dead lost their novelty long ago. But the pink and teal tile cross of the woman who died in her 40s caught my eye again. I walked over, deep in the graveyard, and as I looked at her, I bitterly thought 40 was a far better age than 14 to die. On my way out, I found Nathan's large headstone, and it was as if something faintly just cracked. I told him everything about Nico, about me. Hot, angry tears poured for her, for him, for lost children I would never have, as I demanded him to tell me, what the hell was this? But he did not answer. All I heard was shrieking laughs of tiny children across the street. Perhaps it was his revenge for suddenly bothering him after such a long absence, or maybe he was just dead and all the ghosts were mine alone. I still dream of Nicolasa sometimes. I tell her updates on my life and ask her where she is and when can I come visit. She says nothing. I found a photo of her headstone years ago on a website along with an article about the gruesome details of her car accident. I was shocked how close she was buried. My family made it seem like she was just forever away. In hindsight, beyond my mother's beliefs, I realized it was because my brothers aren't the kind to ask for frivolous things like visiting the dead. I stared at her headstone with an etched photo of her on the marble. Her sweet, laughing face looks more childish every time I look at it. My last visit to Nathan was during last year in a burst of nostalgia. His headstone was still large and tilting at an angle, but what caught my eye were the tombstones around him. He was surrounded by his family. Brothers, sisters, mother, father. Death met them at different ages. Nathan's father left last, and as much time as I spent in mourning Nathan's lost youth, now I couldn't tear my eyes away from the elderly man's lifespan. All that death, and he just kept on living. Perhaps that was the answer I was looking for all along.
Give it up one more time for Katy Manning. Give it up one more time for Grown Up Story Time. Give it up one more time for tipping your bartenders. Give it up one more time for you coming out here. Give it up one more time for going over there. Give it up one more time for me. Give it up 2 more times for me, you fucking assholes. Thank you for being tall, Katie. I appreciate this. Thank you for the rest of you for doing the thing. Remember, tip your bartenders. Come out to the next one. Submit your stories, grownupstorytimehouston.com. Goodbye, you fucking nerds. Yeah.
Up at the sky. It's a full moon on the Sabbath. This is scary. Break it down.
I was